folks, welcome back. Dennis Vetosa, also known as F Noodles, and today we're going to be talking about Sophie Cunningham, the WNBA, and its trans problem. And yes, the situation is getting out of control, absolutely out of control, because the WNBA can't make up its mind about what a woman is, and they can't make up their minds about whether they want men in women's spaces. It seems like they do want men in women's spaces, and that's where much of the confusion is coming from. Anyway, if you remember, all of this started a few days ago when Sophie Cunningham said that she wanted to protect women's sports from biological men. She then doubled down saying, I said what I said. I think it's kind of common sense. And then all hell broke loose. That discussion has been going on ever since then. And today we're going to be looking at many of the responses from around the WNBA, including some of Cunningham's teammates, coaches in the WNBA, as well as people who aren't even basketball players, but have nonetheless weighed in on the situation. And we're going to look at the WNBA's extraordinary response to this whole situation. So yeah, let's jump right into this. The first response we're going to be looking at is from Caitlyn Clark. She was pressed during a press conference about what she thought about this whole situation, and this is what Caitlyn had to say.
I think for us, it's not really a discussion we really have in our locker room. I think it's for leagues and the governing bodies to work with their athletes to find solutions, but our focus is on basketball, and that's what we talk about and how we can get wins, and obviously we didn't do that tonight, so need to find an area to improve in that way.
Do you have any, reaction to the...
I just answered for you.
And that was Caitlyn Clark's response, which, to be fair, I found to be pretty reasonable. Why? Because she's a basketball player. She doesn't have to be talking about politics her entire career. I think it's perfectly reasonable for Caitlyn Clark to not want to feed into the circus. She is one of the most visible basketball players in the league. She doesn't have to support anybody. She can defer to her team's management. She can defer to her coach. She can defer to whoever she wants. It's not part of her contract to have to take a political stance on every situation out there. And she actually got a lot of flack for taking this position. A lot of people were calling her a coward. Megyn Kelly was calling her a coward for not having an opinion. And honestly, I disagree with Megyn Kelly. Nothing is obligating Caitlyn Clark to throw herself into the pressure cooker that is political discourse in America today. It's obviously a very divisive topic, especially when you're dealing with the WNBA. A lot of women seem to be very emotional over this topic, over whether biological men should be allowed to participate in women's sports. One of those people being the coach of the Minnesota Lynx, Cheryl Reeve, who, if you remember, had already made comments supporting trans people. Then the day the Lynx played the Indiana Fever, Cheryl Reeve wore a shirt that said trans kids belong. And later, during the post-game interview, she had this to say.
Before the game, you had a conversation with Sophie Cunningham.
I did.
If you want to share what you talked
Absolutely
about, feel
not.
free. But more of my question is just how important is it to have those in-person conversations with people that
I think it's
have
great.
different views?
I think it's great. I think both of us understand that we have platforms, and, we both talked about, wanting to, more than anything, educate. And there are some things that, we have in common and maybe some things you differ on, just like any issues. And I think it's how you handle things. And so it was nice to be in person, for sure.
Well, that was a whole lot of nothing that she just said there. Obviously, she's skirting the issue and skirting what she actually talked to Sophie Cunningham about. And that is in reference to a conversation that a lot of people were speculating about that happened pre-game, as was mentioned here. A lot of people were speculating about what these two ladies were talking about. Clearly, Cheryl didn't want to share, and obviously it's her prerogative whether or not she wants to share that. But at the end of the day, Sophie Cunningham did say in a statement later what these two ladies talked about. She said, I respected Cheryl Reeve for coming up to me in person. A lot of people hide behind screens. She has stories about her point of view, and I have stories about my point of view. We left with love and respect. And honestly, that's actually pretty good, because that's all you can hope for. You can disagree on things, but at the end of the day, as long as people can have a rational, grounded conversation that isn't just full-blown meltdowns or personal attacks, and just, I guess, you have to agree to disagree. That's what rational, grown adults do in a civilized country. I think that we can start healing and moving forward as a country if we're able to have more conversations like that. Anyway, that being said, Cheryl Reeve got called out shortly after that, pretty much the next day, when people realized that there was a clip of her saying the following on the internet.
We had more women coaching college basketball before Title IX, after Title IX, when it became more important and more investment. That was code for.
And you got paid
it's a man's
more.
job. Got paid more. Became a man's job. And so to this day, we still don't have more women coaching in college basketball than we do men. So that same thing, apply that same thing. When 2 years ago, we lost 7 WNBA coaches, right? They got fired because all of a sudden this money became more, the WNBA blew up, valuations of franchises, right? In comes the NBA folks again, who had cast us aside for many years. In they come again, right? Now they want their franchises back and that sort of thing. It's more important again. And then we have more men. When we have NBA people.
Well, that is a very interesting argument to make, that you don't like the fact that men are coming into your league and taking over your league, taking over coaching jobs, but at the same time, you're advocating for trans women to come in and potentially take the jobs of biological female players. Is that really where you want to draw the line, Cheryl? As long as they're not coming for your job, you're okay with it. But if they're coming for the players' jobs, if it's the Sophie Cunninghams who are potentially having their jobs put at risk, all of a sudden you're okay with that. All of a sudden trans people belong. Okay, I got you. I see you, Cheryl. Anyway, she wasn't the only WNBA coach to take this sort of stance. Natalie Nakase from the Valkyrie also defended trans athletes, saying the following.
It's like, for me, sports is about belonging. It's about inclusivity. It's about allowing everyone to be their authentic self.
Oh my God.
I'm big on that, just because I have been criticized for my height, for my ethnicity. I've been in those "you shouldn't belong here" many times. And for me, I don't want that space, especially Golden State, to ever feel like that. So I'm all about women, little girls deserving to play, and that includes trans women. So I'm all about inclusivity.
Actually, sports is about performance. That's the only way you get included in sports, if you're good enough to win. What are we even doing here? It's got nothing to do with identity. It's got nothing to do with, hey, we need this quota of people here and that quota of people there. No, sports has always been about the team that wins the chip. That's all it's ever been about, the team that wins the most. Nobody gives a flying fuck about who the players are. Just be good enough to play and win. That's all that's sports has ever been about historically. That's why Jesse Owens back in the Olympics, that's all that mattered. He humiliated Hitler. Can we just take a second right now and not completely lose our minds over objective reality? Why do liberals always have to infuse this victim narrative into sports? Oh my God, I was such a victim. I'm a short Asian player playing basketball and people made fun of me. Guess what? Muggsy Bogues and some of the greatest point guards in the history of the NBA were 5'0", and they can still dunk on your ass. So please get this victim mentality out of sports. It's supposed to be about being good and winning championships. Just cut it out. Anyway, speaking of cutting it out, somebody who's got to cut it out is Megan Rapinoe. She has been losing her mind over this Sophie Cunningham situation. This is what she had to say.
I want to address the controversy that is happening right now around trans women in sports. As you know, I've talked about this a lot and will continue to keep talking about this. I don't know Sophie, so I can only project what I see about her beliefs based on her actions. And seeing a picture of her with Riley Gaines after the game told me everything I need to know about what's happening. Riley Gaines has made it her life's mission to exclude trans people from public life. She's directly tied to the Heritage Foundation, the authors of Project 2025 and now 2026. Who have now published a report that suggests that they want to repeal Title IX, the very piece of legislation that allowed athletes like Sophie and myself to compete in sports. Sophie has claimed both to love trans people and support Title IX. And this is where I think the accountability with having a major platform is extremely important. You can hear it even in the language being used that the root of trans exclusion is to protect young girls from men. To be clear, I would love to have that conversation, and it's much needed in this country. But it frames the conversation as if we're protecting young girls from men being in WNBA locker rooms. Not happening. It villainizes trans girls as if they're somehow magically older than their peers or are men, when in reality, they are also young girls. These laws are excluding kids from playing youth sports.
False.
If we want to have a conversation around elite sports, there are effective policies that have been in place for many years that no one noticed because they worked. So if anybody is taking these talking points as legit, or believing they're protecting young girls in sports. I just have to ask, are you serious?
This chick is so insufferable. Absolutely insufferable. She's got the energy of a 15-year-old boy. I guess she's still holding on to that energy after she and the U.S. women's national team got whooped by a team of 15-year-old boys. Anyway, needless to say, she's still completely misframing everything here and completely missing the point. The point is that young women are now having to compete with young boys who identify as girls. That's really what the issue is. A.B. Hernandez is one of the most visible examples, as well as Alyssa Liu's sibling, Jalen Liu, who is a transgender athlete competing here in California. Both athletes, in fact, are here in California. That's really what the conversation is about. It's about these student athletes potentially taking up scholarships, resources, and opportunities away from young girls when they could very well compete in their own category. Why can't trans athletes have their own category? This isn't about excluding trans people. It's about recognizing biological advantages. Because let's keep it real for a second here, folks. You very rarely see a female-to-male athlete dominate their sport in the manner in which male-to-female athletes have been dominating. That's a conversation that's worth having. That's a conversation these girls who are advocating for this want to have, and that's what Sophie Cunningham herself wants to have. To say that the conversation is about anything except this is to be thoroughly dishonest. But Megan Rapinoe isn't really known for wanting to have honest conversations, or her thoughts for that matter. She's known for playing soccer. She's known for being somewhat of a decent soccer player and then taking an extraordinary amount of knees. Anyway, Coco Gauff also shared her thoughts on this, and honestly, I don't know. I don't know why all these people are sharing their thoughts on this. It's irrelevant. It really is. None of this should matter. How about you just play your sport? Do what Caitlyn Clark did. But no, here we are listening to Coco Gauff for whatever reason.
Hi, Coco. The WTA recently said it's going to give gender tests to the players on tour. What's your impression of that? What do you feel about it? And what did the WTA do to prepare you guys for what's to come on that?
Yeah, I mean, as far as, I guess, with that, I mean, I know it's been something that's been talked about a while, but I've talked to a couple other players, and a lot of them didn't find out until the press release. So I do think that's something that could have been more transparent amongst like players across the tour. As far as that, I mean, I understand the reasoning behind it. I do think that this kind of conversation is created a lot of animosity towards the trans community, which I'm not really a big fan of, but I also understand the need to, I guess, the biological difference and the need to protect that and preserve that. So I think it's a conversation that is very nuanced, and it creates clauses, or I need to have a nuanced answer. So yes, I guess kind of agree with trying to protect the fairness in women's sports, but also do not like the attack that it is creating people who don't really care but just want to use this as a reason to attack the trans community. So I'm not really a big fan of that either. So I don't really know how to answer really this question in a way that people aren't going to spin it. But as far as where I stand, I definitely support the trans community, but I also support the need of creating fairness in sport too.
You know what? That was actually pretty reasonable. Yeah, it's perfectly reasonable to say that you should protect fairness in women's sports and that you shouldn't attack any community, whether it's the trans community or any other community. No community should ever be under attack. That being said, I do think she falsely characterizes what's happening. Criticism isn't the same thing as an attack. Every community, every single aspect of society is open for criticism if we truly have freedom of speech. To unfairly characterize criticism as an attack is just dishonest and honestly low IQ. But again, these people are athletes, so I don't really have my expectations set too that high. I mean, this woman couldn't even say the word animosity without stumbling over her own words. No disrespect, because she's actually been one of the few people to say something even relatively reasonable, much more reasonable than Megan Rapinoe. But either way, yeah, again, I agree. You don't have to target a community, and they shouldn't be targeted. You can support trans people's rights to exist and live how they want to live while still drawing boundaries around issues involving children and protecting women's spaces. Just create a whole separate category for trans athletes. That could be a reasonable solution. Why hasn't this ever been seriously suggested as a solution? Just think about it, folks. Anyway, Sophie Cunningham later gave a statement as this controversy continued to grow, and needless to say, a lot of people were not very happy with this follow-up statement from Cunningham, and this is what Cunningham said.
I think that there's so much good going on in the WNBA. I think that basketball is being played at the highest level it's ever been. I think our team in specific, we are breaking history right now with the amount of points that we're scoring on back-to-back games. I think the Minnesota game, there's just so much distraction. I think the WNBA media, all we ever do is cover everything except basketball. And it's like, what are we doing? There's so much, you can talk about other things. I think those are great stories. I think it shows fans, who people are outside of the court. But I also think we got to keep the main thing the main thing. And I think when it comes to the Minnesota game, I think there's so much distraction. But the matchup between Miles and Kelsey was phenomenal. Our team, that game in particular was a great game. And so I think that there's a lot to be said, and I'm going to let people just do the speaking for themselves. But for me, I want to get back to basketball. It's always been about basketball. That interview happened in February when I was asked a question. And so for me, I just want to, make sure that it stays, the focus stays where it should, because people are playing at such a high level. We have probably 3 MVPs that could be MVPs on our team specifically. And so that's why I want to do that. No, I was asked a question, and that's simply what it was. I just wasn't making a statement to make a statement. And so I was trying to clear the air, and I did that back in February. And so it is what it is. And like I said, we're in the middle of the season. I'm going to keep it that. We talk about a bunch of distraction. Our team is good. My teammates are good. Our locker room is great. And so now we're just here about to prepare for Las Vegas, and that's where our mind is at.
Now, some folks online were attacking Sophie Cunningham for this interview, saying that she was being evasive here, that she was backpedaling, but this is honestly just common sense. She's just saying that she wants to focus on the main thing, which is basketball. She's saying that this interview was dug up from back in February, which personally I had no idea that it was dug up that far back, but honestly, that makes absolute sense. Activists will often dig up old interviews to agitate a topic and turn it into a national conversation so they can start making examples out of people, create a renewed debate, and shame people into silence, which is likely part of what's happening here. Anyway, that being said, I agree with Sophie Cunningham. Just focus on basketball. If I were a basketball player, that's all I would want to be focusing on. Yes, I would have my political opinions. I wouldn't hide from them, but I wouldn't want to make my political opinions the center of my career because I'm not a politician. I'm a basketball player. That said, I think part of the reason why the WNBA media focuses on this is because drama sells, and that's really why they would want to focus on this more, because it gets more views. Anyway, ever since this topic became a national conversation, people have been bringing up different scenarios and challenging the WNBA to put its money where its mouth is. So much so that a French transgender player told the WNBA that he would sign with a team and compete against female players if the league allows it. Here's the news coverage on this.
Look at your screen. A French trans player says if the WNBA gives them a chance to play in the league, they would not turn down an offer. I'd like to now go to my co-anchor for the day who actually played women's basketball.
That is never going to happen. Hilarious, but it's never going to happen. The WNBA will never take this offer. They never will. They'll never take this up, okay? It's just never going to happen. I don't know how many times I have to say it. Let's just be real. Okay, these people are just virtue signalers. They're never going to put their money where their mouth is. When it comes down to women potentially losing their jobs to biological men, it's not going to happen, okay? I wish it did happen. Would be hilarious, but it's not going to happen. Anyway, that being said, this transgender athlete wasn't the only one to throw his hat in the ring. Enes Kanter also threw his hat in the ring. In a video that he published today, this is what he had to say.
After careful consideration and reviewing the current eligibility guidelines, I am officially declaring myself a WNBA prospect. If simply declaring who you are is all that's required, then I meet every single requirement necessary to compete in the WNBA. My team and I have carefully examined the WNBA's eligibility criteria and governing framework surrounding self-identification and inclusion. Based on the current guidelines, I can and am officially declaring my eligibility for the upcoming WNBA draft in May 2027. I am definitely not here to mock, make fun of, or disrespect any community or personal choices. I am simply asking that the current rules be applied equally to everyone. The rules that represent the very values many WNBA players and coaches have publicly advocated for. My team and I are prepared to ensure these guidelines are applied equally, consistently, and without exception. And I look forward to the WNBA honoring its stated principles. See you at training camp.
Never going to happen. I don't think I even have to tell you this. This one is never going to happen. And by the way, the most hilarious part is that all these women are absolutely losing their minds over this. They're losing their shit on X right now because Enes posted this, which I find hilarious because it's never going to happen. I mean, everybody's just calling out the WNBA's bluff. They're never going to do it, though. They're never going to put a trans athlete or even a straight male athlete in the WNBA. They're never going to hire Enes Kanter. None of this is going to happen. They're just going to make themselves look like fools, hypocrites, and honestly, I'm all here for it. Anyway, all that being said, the WNBA Players Association did publish a statement saying the following: to everyone who loves this game, the WNBPA represents 200 plus individual people with different lived experiences, cultures, lifestyles, and opinions. We embrace justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Shut up. Those are the values that unite this union and allow it to protect women's sports while creating transformational change. Hate, abuse, and demonization of any person or group of people, including transgender people, only fuel fear, division, and harm. We will continue to have hard conversations, but we will not be used as political pawns. Support the players, support the fans at games, notify security if you witness hateful, violent, and abusive content online, report abusive posts, and drown out the bots and the bad actors at home. Tell your elected officials to strengthen Title IX. What? This is just subjectively insane. These people have learned nothing. They don't understand how the world works, and they're just out of their minds. I mean, if you're here to protect trans athletes, why don't you have a single transgender athlete in your league? You are being so unbelievably discriminatory right now, okay? I'm just saying, WNBA, stop discriminating against trans athletes. Put them in your league if that's what you really believe. Anyway, folks, you tell me what you think in the comments down below. Make sure you like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Share it with a friend if you think they'll enjoy it as well. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Peace.